So here we have with us another amazing monk. You all are going to learn French today. It's mandatory for today's Heartspace. And the reason is because the French people here are the most loving people you'll find. And the Dutch people are no far behind. They're equally loving and kind. And the Germans are also not far behind. So we're so happy to be with all of you. Thank you all for joining us for the Heartspace. So I want to introduce to you this beautiful saint who always smiles at all adversities and is equipoised in both good and bad times. I just met him one day ago. My good fortune and misfortune that I haven't met him before. He's doing some incredible stuff in Europe and right now in Bulgaria. So let us welcome our beautiful saintly monk here, Mahendra Prabhu. And today we're discussing this third island of the heart called Smaranam. So, are we all ready to start?
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. It's my great pleasure and honor to be with you today. I'm sure we'll never be bored by Vedaji, but he's so kind to just introduce me like that. So this island of remembrance, the third island, in Sanskrit called Smaranam, is very, very important that we take care of that because it affects all our being and well-being. Actually, it's the space where we exist and we reside, no matter what are the outside circumstances. So normally in our lives, circumstances determine where we are and determine our mode of consciousness. But a true yogi or a spiritual seeker actually is not affected by the external circumstances, but can control the internal space despite the external circumstances. But that's achieved not in a cheap way. It requires a consistent practice and remembrance. And the first remembrance is who we actually are. And that knowledge is called in Bhagavad Gita, probably you heard of that ancient classic yogic text. So that knowledge is called Raja Vidya, or the king of knowledge, the best knowledge of all. And it's also called Raja Guhyam, or the greatest secret or mystery. So the Guhyam word is very interesting because it means a secret, but it means also a cave or a space. So Upanishads are the Sanskrit old texts, thousands of years old, which actually tell us who we really are and what is our destiny. So they talk about the Guhyam, the cave. So it's translated usually as the heart. And again, that means that there is a space. There is a space. Obviously, that's not the physical organ of the heart. So that's also called Chitta, as you mentioned, the Chitta cleaning that space of consciousness of the heart. So the Upanishads, in different ways, they present this knowledge, this great secret of who we actually are. And once we understand and accept this knowledge, our life can change. The heart can be transferred, or even there is a expression of heart revolution. So we can see the reality in a completely different way, ourselves and all other beings also. And that we can relate in a way which we thought before it was very difficult or impossible. Without anger, without envy, without gross lust and qualities which actually disturb us and make our life miserable. And instead we have a natural respect for every creature and for the nature also, and gratitude and love. That comes naturally, it manifests. So that nature which these ancient texts describe, usually it's described in 3 words in Sanskrit. So we are called Atma, or soul, although soul is not a precise translation. And that Atma is these 3: eternal, Sat, Chit, it's conscious or full of knowledge, and Ananda, full of bliss. So if you know that you are eternal, that you are always happy, that's your nature, and you're full of knowledge, you're not ignorant, and you don't have any problems, ecological, then Once you realize that, that's the goal of yoga. You will be very happy. But to come to that level of realization, because one thing to know it like an intellectual information, but to realize it, or in other words, to live it, to become part of your life or your reality, you have to go through a disciplined process of practice. So there are many books which describe different ways of yoga practice, which comes to that same end. For example, Patanjali is one of the first compilers of yoga texts. He wrote Yoga Sutras, and he says in the beginning, the first sutra says, I will now describe what yoga is, the process of yoga, which is some very ancient knowledge which I heard, and I'll give it to you. So what he says about yoga, that's the second sutra. Sutra means a very short sentence, not even sentence, just a short, what's it? Aphorism, yeah. So the second, he describes what yoga is. Have you heard what yoga is, or have you thought about that? And Chitta Vritti nirodha means the chitta, or the consciousness, and its transformations, the vritti, or the thought process. Nirodha means to calm down. And the next sutra, he says, what will be the result? Why do we want to control the mind and regulate the thought process? He says, we'll see who we are. So Rupa, we'll see our own self, which is very blissful. So we'll be happy. That's the goal of yoga. Now that sounds like a nice theory. What it has to do with our busy lives today? Now, Zara kindly said that I'm always happy and not affected by any circumstances, and I wish it was like that. But we're on the path of yoga. We're trying to, and after some years of practice, then actually you can experience this. So yoga is not just abstract philosophy or dry philosophy, although there are a lot of abstract and complex concepts. It has to be practical, it has to be applied. I actually studied philosophy in university, and in my defense, a professor asked me, my treatise was on Eastern philosophy, Vedanta. He asked me, what's the difference between Eastern or Indian and Vedanta philosophy and Western philosophy? So I said, Western student can do anything in their life and still present some philosophical ideas, and everybody, if that's intelligent and consistent, logical, they accept, yeah, that's a great philosopher. But in the yoga philosophy, unless you apply it in your life, it's useless. So one of the important part of the method of yoga is to train the mind or the chitta in a specific way by, for example, the method which Vedaji is giving with these different islands of the mind space, or the chitta, or the heart space, and then carefully actually maintain that space in a certain way. So why remembrance is so important in the process of yoga, or what does it mean actually? Because that's what we remember, and where we keep our consciousness, that's where we are at the moment. For example, some of you may sit now here and listen, but if I'm too boring, you may be somewhere else thinking, and you'll be actually there. But not only that, one can physically actually alter his or her state of the body through the remembrance. I'll tell a real story about my father. He had a very complicated, when he was young, I don't remember, I was a small child, but he had a very serious issue of disease in here in the sinuses. So they had to operate him many times, around 45 years ago. So at that time, medicine was not advanced, at least in that place. And so they operated these things by inserting the instruments within the nose and removing these, whatever it was, without anesthesia. We can't even imagine how painful it is. But he told me that he started practicing yoga, and this was the first yoga introduced at that time in the 60s, in the 70s. And then he had developed some practice to exercise pranayama, but especially concentration. So basically, Smaranam, or in Sanskrit, or dhyana, is synonyms many times. It's meditation and remembrance is the same in that interpretation of these words in the yoga dictionary. Dhyana, meditation, and Smaranam is synonyms. So my father told me he actually started to meditate during the operation in such a way that he didn't feel anything. He was in another space through remembrance. And the doctor, the chirurgeon, was absolutely shocked to see that there was no reaction. And he's like, how you do it? How is this possible? So my father said, I just remember, or I'm really focusing on meditating on a field with flowers, which I remember from my childhood. And it was so blissful and happy experience that I just transfer myself and I completely forget. So this is a question of practice. We practice to be satisfied within our space of heart or heart space. So this is part of the yoga process. It's prescribed. Quote in Sanskrit, santosha. It's one of the niyamas or the positive steps you have to do. You have to practice every day. Just like you have to practice cleanliness, both external and internal. Yeah, and also you have to do the other niyama is, for example, svadhyaya, self-study or study of sacred texts. So the same, santosha, you cultivate being satisfied. So I thought this is something I can focus and just that you can remember after that session, that this is a very important part of yoga, that we are satisfied consciously. We go to that space within our heart where we look for that, and we are satisfied no matter what the external circumstances are. And for that, we can't do it. You cannot do it artificially. You cannot just say, "Well, I'm satisfied." You have to create an environment and culture that supports this. But this is another longer discussion, which I'm sure Vedasar will cover, about how the energies work in this world. That they are, according to the yoga philosophy, in different modes, and they affect our being. These different modes. They're called in Sanskrit gunas. They tie us. They condition us in a certain way. So in yoga, we try to elevate ourselves, especially our consciousness, but also the physical maintenance of our body. That's why the yoga process is there, including our physical body, to come to the high level of what is called sattva or light and goodness. And the more we come to that, the more we will become naturally happy, because that's the state of happiness. It's in sattva, it's in goodness. True and lasting happiness is not in rajas, which is coming through the flickering sensual gratification. So to come to that sattva, there are different prescriptions and different ways to do it. Yeah. But we come to the basics, and I'm sure most of you have heard different advices about how to sleep, how much, when, what to eat, and things like that. But especially the hearing part, which is the first island, is so much connected with the remembrance part. So our environment, including our association, the people with whom we connect, is very, very much connected with this third island of because from that association we get impressions, in Sanskrit samskaras, which actually form our memory, our remembrance. For example, if you watch a horror movie, anyone watch a horror movie? You're not such souls. You all see so gentle. Maybe not horror movie, but something with a lot of violence, and you remember after that. It just comes. So in yoga, you create the opposite. You create impressions through hearing and proper association and environment. Then the consciousness spontaneously goes to that space where we want it to be, and then it's not so difficult. It's very, very natural and spontaneous. So what we can do practically, so practical steps. You try to cultivate this feeling of satisfaction, santosha, through proper environment and culture which you cultivated in the mode of goodness, and especially about thinking of a higher goal or ultimate goal, which is very much emphasized in all yoga's texts. Actually, there are two Sanskrit words defining different types of goals. And this is the last thing which I will say with some short story. One word is shreyas, the other is prayas. So prayas means immediate pleasure, and shreyas is the ultimate pleasure, ultimate goal, which is ultimately good for us. So this is described in Katha Upanishad, one of the most ancient Upanishads. And so it starts with an interesting story of a boy who was watching his father doing a sacrifice.
Et donc, ça commence avec une histoire assez intéressante. C'était un jeune garçon qui observe.
So his name was Nachiketas. He was asking, Father, what do you offer now? And he was offering different, grains and clarified butter, etc. So as small children, sometimes they could be annoying with their questions. I was just with a family who were telling me their small daughter just always interrupting, asking questions. It can be annoying. And this father was at one point very annoying and said, I'll sacrifice you. I'll offer you. It's sometimes you just say it out like just. So anyway, what happened? Of course, he didn't sacrifice his son. But what happened is that his son went to another realm, not in this physical plane. He went to Yamaraj. But Yamaraj, that's the superintendent of our karma, he wasn't there. So Nachiketas waited. And after some time, Yamaraj came. And Yamaraj said, oh, you're my guest, but I wasn't here to welcome you. I'm so sorry. What can I do for you? I promise you I'll fulfill 3 desires, whatever they are. If you are asked, if you offer this, what would you desire? Have you thought about it? Any suggestions? A house?
Une maison, par exemple.
Wonderful relations. Okay, but actually the first answer is very, very, because that's what he asked. He asked, well, can my father be happy with me? And the second was, when I come back, I want that nothing happened. We continue with our loving relationship with my father. Only one last, and then Yamaraj, okay, that's granted. What's the last? And Nachiketa said, I want knowledge about the self. You tell me about Atma. He actually didn't say Atma because he was a small boy, but he was asking after that what happens with the self. The question is about Atma Jnana, the knowledge of the self. Knowledge, which I said is the greatest mystery, and the knowledge and the understanding of which we should keep in our island of remembrance. Always. It's mystery because it's very confidential. That's the other meaning of Guhyam. And traditionally in the Vedic culture and tradition, it was not given easily. You have to be qualified. So Yamaraj said, can you ask for something else? I can give you whatever you want. And he started offering. I can give you kingdoms. I can give you unlimited wealth. I can give you beautiful wife. I can give you anything you want. And Nachiketa said, no, thank you. Answer my question. Then Yamaraj continued a little bit more, he was offering more. I forget all the details, but it went for some time. And Nachiketa said, please answer my question. And then finally Yamaraj said, yes, okay, you are qualified to receive Atma Jnana. So then he started explaining what the soul is, who we really are, that confidential knowledge. That's the whole Katha Upanishad. And at one point, he said something very important. He gave comparison that our heart, besides that it's compared to, I think there also it's compared to a cave, it's compared also to a tree. So he said, in that tree, there are 2 birds, and one bird is eating the fruits of the tree, and the other bird is just watching. And these 2 birds are good friends. And that bird which is watching actually can solve all the problems, but waits for the other bird, the small bird, to give up the desire to enjoy the fruits. So these 2 birds are the soul, which I mentioned, and the other bird, who just observer, or is in Bhagavad Gita, is described as Anumanta Upadrashta, the supreme soul, who observes and gives permission for everything. In other words, gives the karma and guidance and memory and forgetfulness and everything. So when the individual Atma, the Upanishad says, turns to that supreme Atma, then all the problems are solved. So it's a question of turning our attention in the proper direction. And that is so much dependent in this island of remembrance, where our attention goes and stays. So therefore, yogis, they hear and they read and they remember these explanations and stories from the sacred texts, so that they keep their attention in the right direction. So thank you very much. That was from myself. And